The final episode of Weber State Weekly's softball show this season. We're a member of the Big Sky Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Colby Peterson. On this final show, we've got the Signpost's own Simon Mortensen. Simon with the shirt, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm missing the season though. I wish I could still
No.
watch him play, but yeah.
Yeah, here we are, at the end of the season. We're now sitting here at the end of May, and we thought it would never end, and guess what? It ended. And but we had a good run, man. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But great season, great, one of the best squads that this Wildcat program has ever seen, maybe the conference has ever seen. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So on tonight's show, folks, we're going to be talking a little bit about the NCAA tournament. The Wildcats took the trip up to Seattle, played in a couple of games, one against Texas, who ended up making out of the region to make super regionals. And then also that heartbreaker against Lehigh. We'll break down those two. Then we're going to go into a season recap. We're going to talk about some of our favorite and maybe not so favorite moments of the season. We're going to break all that stuff down, kind of reminisce a little bit about this great team and kind of the action that we saw. And then finally, we're gonna do a segment that I'm calling Cremo the Wildcat Crop. We're gonna be ranking now that all the programs have played. Basically the academic year is over for Wildcat sports. We're gonna rank the seasons that our teams on campus had, and kind of say who had the best season on down to who had the roughest season. So we'll talk a little bit about that, get our rankings, and then that'll be it. So before we get into all that, want to encourage everybody to subscribe to the show, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all good places, even though this is the end of our softball coverage for the season. We will be going into off-season programming, so every couple of weeks, we're going to be aiming to bring you alumni interviews from players, wherever they may be, former Wildcat athletes who are now doing whatever they might be doing in the world. And so we'll be trying to get those out to you folks every couple of weeks to keep your feed not totally stagnant, right? We want to keep you guys with some content as we head into off season, give us an opportunity to kind of work through some things. But a good thing to do in the off season is follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all good places to find Weber State Weekly and follow up with us. So hit us up on all of those things. It's a great place. Like I said, even though the podcast content may not be coming as often, we'll be just as active on social media talking about things and pushing out new ideas, maybe getting some feedback from you folks on kind of what you'd like to hear in season 3 next year of Weber State Weekly. And then, of course, we've got a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Weber State Weekly and support our work. We really want to say thank you to our patrons this year who have done such an amazing favor to us at Weber State Weekly, supporting our work, helping us to kind of keep the lights on and continue to do the show that we love so very much, bring you this good content, scheduling these interviews with you folks, and helping you all get to know the Wildcat teams, student athletes, coaches, all of those things. Really want to thank our patrons for making all of that possible. And we'll be working in the off season to revamp our Patreon program so that we can hopefully bring you more of what you want and reward our patrons even more in season 3 of Weber State Weekly. And then finally, last shout out of the season, we want to thank Studio 98 for being rich and very generous supporters of Weber State Weekly this season. If you didn't know who they are, they make rings right there in Ogden. They make custom rings who are made of unique materials, often lots of wood. I saw that there was a very special ring that the owner, if you don't know him, he's a Ogden City councilman, Wildcat through and through. Made his wife just this gorgeous ring off of a trip that they just took to Europe. Lots of little trinkets that they found along their trip, took all those parts, made it into a ring. So Ben Nadolski, want to thank you so much for your support of Weber State Weekly this year. And go check out the website, folks, studio98.com. That's studio, N-I-N-E, and the number 8.com. They make great rings. Like I said, a former Wildcat football player, now an Ogden City Council member, and just a great community member. Go out there, support him. Super good guy. I bet you if you email him, he might make you this ring. Go check it out. All the good stuff that they've done and their support of Weber State Weekly. Can't thank them enough. So, all right, Simon, that was kind of like our last intro of the season. Let's talk a little bit about this NCAA tournament run. So the Wildcats, they pack their bags, head up to the Seattle Regional as a 3 seed. First time that's ever happened in conference history. And the Wildcats get a tough draw. They get Texas first. And we didn't know what to expect necessarily from a Texas team who maybe, there was a lot of explanation in the media going into last weekend about how they didn't feel snubbed, but they were surprised they were going to Seattle, right? I think that's cover. I think that they felt snubbed. They felt that they should be hosting, not Washington. And so to see them come out of the regional into the super regionals and beat Washington twice probably helps them to feel really good. But the Wildcats got to face them on opening day of the regional, and it was tough, man. We talked a lot last week about the fact that that Texas was a very patient team at the plate. And I think we saw that, right, man? They were as advertised on offense. We talked about Janae Jefferson and the phenomenal player that she is. Watching the broadcast and kind of hearing them talk about the records that she has at not just the University of Texas, but also in the Big 12 conference. I mean, she's a generational player. She went 3 for 4. She had a home run, kind of a frozen rope that went over the field, over the wall. When it came to the offense, I mean, the pitching was pretty good. Just, what do you do against a team that came out of the regionals? Didn't get run ruled, 6 runs. They held Texas to just 6 runs. The teams did worse.
Yep, exactly. I think that is one thing. And they had every right to feel a little bit surprised, a little bit snubbed. I think it's obviously a testament to the conference that they're in. If they were in a different conference, I think they would have been a 1 seed. That's pretty easy to understand. Janae Jefferson definitely lived up to the hype. I'll totally say it. Those three hits, and especially a home run right there. And Wildcats had a lot of really good pitching. You had Mo Ramirez and Arissa Henderson out there, and so I think that was one where, it was heartbroken to see him lose that game, but it was one that was definitely a tough one. I like that we got a few players on base in that first inning. I think that was one thing. I think Coach Amicone was trying to strike, kind of hit him hard fast. And it almost worked. I think we got Faith Ho almost inside. Just wasn't playing out.
Yeah, she was there on third base. She was 60 feet away from scoring a run. And you're right. That was the MO, right? Do damage early. The Wildcats had success doing that. And they almost were able to do that in the top of that first inning.
Right. Yep, exactly. And so I think that's just one of those things, when that didn't go through, kind of killed the momentum a little bit. And then obviously we saw that Texas team patient on the plate. I don't think they scored till the third. I think they may have scored once in the second inning, but I think it was the third inning that they really started to. The fourth inning was when they went up from 3 to 6. So I think it was once in the second and then twice in the third. But yeah, it was one of those teams that was slowly eating you.
Yeah, once in the first, 2 in the second, puts up a 0 in the third, but then, like you said, that fourth inning, they put up 3. That includes the
That's right.
run from Janae Jefferson. It was a solo. The Wildcats were able to kind of think. They brought Mo Ramirez in, able to kind of lock things down, and did a good job of holding Texas, but the Wildcat offense just couldn't get anything going, and so they ended up falling 6-0. Tough.
And credit to Texas. I think we were talking about their defense maybe being the little struggling point that they might have, and clearly locked it up. Estelle Check pitched a great game. That was a hard one. I was wishing we could get something against that defense because I think that was their one weak point that we could have gotten something against. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one thing that I pointed out in the rundown that I was surprised at, because we talked about that, about how Texas defensively wasn't necessarily the sharpest team. We knew that they were going to offensively get their hits, and that if you could, contain the damage, that you would have an opportunity. We didn't know who they were going to pitch. They actually ended up pitching their third. They didn't even pitch their first or second, which felt like a snub, right? The Wildcats, they don't even deserve to see Dulcini, who is their ace this season, right? The transfer from Fresno State. But it paid off for them. And I think that that's what hurts, is that they pitched their third best pitcher, and it worked. And I think and part of the reason that it worked was, for some reason, that defense was very, very sharp that day. I think there were two hits into double plays in the game.
Yeah.
Just I think in softball, it's not like baseball. You don't see that often. Hitting into a double play is rare and tough. And they did it a couple of times in the game. And so it's just man, it's just kind of unlucky. And then Texas was kind of getting these just like lucky balls. They're, lofting it over the left side, just above the glove of Emily Rule or McDonough, right? Just enough to get into the outfield. Or, Janae Jefferson, we knew she was going to get on base. And she's fast. Like, she was so fast. And, before you knew it, she was she was within those first 60 feet, and she was heading to second with a double. And she was just so good. But I was surprised at how well Texas's defense performed against the Wildcats. Even though they did have some success, they were able to get on base.
Right.
There were just situations where they'd get on base and they just couldn't get anything going. They just couldn't bring somebody around, because I think that if the Wildcats score a pair in maybe that first or second inning, I think the game looks a lot different than it did, right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's 3-2 going into the third. Like, that's just a completely different thing. And like, I guess I shouldn't feel terrible, because Washington mustered just 2 runs in both of their appearances against Texas, and that
Yep.
was your 14 seed, right? Like, that was Washington, who was a team that was hosting. They got 2 runs against them. Now, of course, you could say, well, yeah, but they were facing Dulcini and others, sure, but
Sure.
I
But
think the Wildcats could have mustered that. It was just unlucky, kind of hitting situationally, and it just didn't work out, which was a bummer.
yeah. Yeah. No, I was and that was the thing, like watching Donahue and Rule out there, like, that was one thing where you could tell, like, it was just those ones that were just right above the glove. It was kind of, it felt a little bit Utah State like to watch.
Yeah.
Because it was just those lucky balls right there. And I'm like, that's the thing, we have seen him prove it time and time again that Rule and Donahue are two of the best defensive players that are out there. Like, especially
Yeah.
Big Sky, like, killed it. And they were just killing it in playoffs, everything like that. No team was getting past them, and so you can't really pinpoint that to the players as much. I think they did a good job at it, and I trust Rule and Donahue every single time. And yeah, it is sometimes the ball just goes right over that glove.
Yeah, and they had some good defensive plays, right? Like,
Yep.
when we
Oh yeah.
talk about the fact that the Wildcats did not get run ruled in this game, they did
Yep.
lose 6-0 to Texas, but there were a lot of really good defensive plays that kept that Texas offense in check, because they had a lot of good hitters, man. Like, Iacopo was as advertised. She was powerful. Now, she's not the one that ended up, hitting home runs in that game, but still, when she was up to the plate, there were some situations where I was very, very nervous, because it was like, oh my gosh, like, Iacopo's coming up and we have, 1 or maybe 2 on, and it's just like, this is a dangerous situation, because we know that she has power. So a credit to the defense and a credit to this pitching staff. They were given a tall order, and yes, the Longhorns scored 6 runs, but I think all being said, like, 6 runs against a team like Texas, when Washington played them the first time, they gave up 8.
Yep. Exactly.
So, you know, kudos to Arissa Henderson and Mo Ramirez for keeping that in check, because it's a tall order. And I think that, by and large, they answered the bell as best they could in that situation.
Absolutely. Yep.
So now, man, let's the Wildcats, like we said, ended up losing in that first day, and so they go down to the bottom of the bracket, and they ended up facing Lehigh, who lost to Washington in that earlier that day, I believe, and so it was Weber State versus Lehigh, and this was a gut punch, man. This was a tough game. Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum had a bet on this game. That was one thing that I was like, come on, Wildcats, like, win this one for Dame, bro.
Right.
He's got 3 wine bottles on this thing here, like, and they talked about that on the broadcast, right? About how, a couple of NBA players, up late tweeting about college softball, and how that was nice.
Right. No, it was awesome just even tweeting about it. I wish it would have gone more in our favor. I really wish McCollum would have lost that bet, obviously, but it was nice to see him tweeting about it. Yeah, that was the gut punch more than the Longhorns were. Like, I think, like, putting a team like against the Longhorns and just losing by 6, I think, like, that's a tall order to try to match up against the Longhorns. But I think we were a better team than Lehigh. I still think we're a better team than Lehigh.
So do I.
And that's what hurt about this game.
Yeah, I mean, because everything looked like the Wildcats had it in hand. Going into the 6th inning, top of the 6th coming up, so the Wildcats are just a bit away of they're just 2 innings away of getting the dub, and of course that would have meant they would have gone on to face Washington, which
Yep.
They did not get the opportunity to do this year. And so things looked okay so long as the pitching held and Mo was dealing. Things were going really well. Ended up giving up a run in the top of the sixth, so it was 4-1, right?
Yep.
Going into the sorry, she gave up a run in the top of the fifth, so it was 4-1. The sixth starts, gave up just one run at the top of the sixth, so it's 4-2, right? Like, okay, manageable. Mo started to falter in that seventh though, and
Yep.
that's when disaster struck. She ended up loading the bases with nobody out, and that's where we ran into some issues.
Yep, exactly. And I think they brought Arissa on to kind of get it down in the seventh a little bit too, if I'm not mistaken. There was pitching change.
There was.
But yeah, I think that's what was hard about this one was just that it all came in on that seventh inning. And it's one of those things where I think anything can happen in the seventh inning. And we've kind of proved it this season with some of the games that we've had that we just pulled out of our hat right there and, immediately came up with X amount of runs or enough runs to tie the game. You look back at that Idaho State game where it was 11-17. And I think we were about to lose that game for a while. But that's one of those things that I think it was just like, unfortunately, hard to close out in a situation like that, and got the better of us. I I think that I think Mo was definitely a little bit tired. I don't think pitching against Texas helped.
Yeah.
It might have been nice to see Mandy Sink on one of those for a bit, just because I think it would have showed like we have three dominant pitchers and we can pull them out of our hat at any time. I think that's one thing where I kind of would have liked to see that come in a little bit more during that Lehigh game, just because I think it would have relieved some of the pitching a little bit. Because I think Mo and Arissa, as great as they are, they do get a little tired. And pitching against a team like Texas the game before, yeah, you're gonna get worn out.
Yeah, I think it's a tough call though, because
Yep.
keep in mind that like Mandy Sink had not pitched since what? The Sac State series?
Sac State series, yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
true. She hadn't pitched during the playoffs,
She
so
didn't
it was
pitch during the
probably
playoffs, and we're talking about the season on the line here.
yep.
I understand the call of the bullpen to bring Arissa Henderson out, right?
Absolutely. No, I
The
totally get the
season's
call from the bullpen.
yeah, but I understand what you're saying too, where it's like, well, if you do bring in Mandy Sink, it's probably a different look than they're not expecting it.
Right.
And I think also it was difficult because at that point the heart of the order is up, and so
Yep.
you're in dangerous territory with the Mountain Hawks lineup because they ended up scoring two, and this is where the gut punch comes in. The strike zone was pretty tight, right? Let's be honest, the strike zone was tight, and the Wildcats end up walking in the go-ahead run,
Yep.
which was just heartbreaking because it was like, because I was going to talk about this next, the fact that Gabrielle Nori had a really, really good outing against the Wildcats, right?
She did.
Like she was really good in a way that Caitlin Young wasn't. The Wildcats were able to put 4 up on Caitlin Young, who was supposed to be Lehigh's ace. They pull her, they bring in Gabrielle Nori, and Nori shuts the Wildcat offense down. They do not score any more runs, and that is like the pain, right? And I was watching her, and I think that what was happening is that like her pitches she wasn't attacking the zone necessarily, right? I felt
No.
like there was a little bit of desperation and chase by the Wildcats, and so they were swinging at things high and out of the zone. There were a lot of high balls that they were going after. That I think if you take more of like a Texas approach, where you say we're going to make her pitch to us, I bet you she walks a lot more batters than the Wildcats let her, because they were trying to swing out of it, and that also makes sense because we talked about the Wildcat hit tool, that attacking, going after balls and swinging at things and putting the ball into play really helped in the non-conference and in the conference schedule, right? Like they would just go at teams. Tried it against Gabby Nori, didn't work. She shuts them down. Lehigh wins 5-4 in a heartbreaker.
Exactly. Yeah, as far as that bottom of the seventh too, I think that's the one where it gets a little bit even more so, because I think like you come in with Rushton, Ho, and Henderson, who are all great batters. Like we've seen it time and again.
Yeah, it looks good, right? Like, okay, maybe
Right.
something.
Maybe something. And I think it's hard. You kind of see him going for these power swings, which is natural. And I think it was just one of those things where I wish there was a way we could have seen it had we gone for something a little bit more conservative and maybe just tried to get on base a little bit and tried to wear him down. Because I think we could have gotten to a point where we could have got the bases loaded a little bit better and maybe been in a little bit better position to score. But I definitely think we were swinging for home when we were going up on that seventh inning a little bit.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yep.
So, like we said, the Wildcats end up losing 5-4 to Lehigh. CJ McCollum wins the bet.
Yeah.
Wildcats go home. That was the end of their season. Lehigh ended up going on to face Washington. They lose that game. That was a late game because they had to play right after that.
Yep.
And so they lose to Washington. Washington faces Texas one more time. Texas beats them 3-2. They make it out of the regional into the super regionals, and that puts a bookend on the end of the Wildcats season. So a historic season. The Wildcats are still conference champions, and that was something we tried on social media. The fact that yes, the Wildcats did not get the ending of the season that they wanted. They did not win an NCAA tournament game where we felt confident they might win one, maybe two, depending on how things go. That this team with the pitching and the defense and the hit tool looked like they were primed for that, but it wasn't to be. But we should always remember that this was a crazy, crazy run, a dominant run. Like there was no doubt that the Wildcats were conference champions, right? Like
Exactly.
run ruling their way through the entire conference tournament, not giving up a single run. Like it was as dominant a performance at Wildcat softball field, I think, as we're ever going to see.
Yep. Exactly. And I think it's nice because I think one of the goals of this season, especially when I was talking with players back in January before the season started, was it wasn't only like to win some conference games and everything like that, not some like conference championship games because um, they obviously did want to win in the tournament. Like that was one thing that they really wanted to do again. They talked about that 2019 season and we're just in love with it. But I remember Casey Whiting was just saying like how much she wanted to make Weber State look like one of the big teams because she believed we were at that level. And not only run ruling your way through the conference tournament and everything like that, but you look at that phenomenal preseason, you look at this fantastic regular season that wins another regular season title and everything. And it would have solidified that even more had they won in the NCAA tournament. Like I'm not going to say it wouldn't have, but it obviously is so nice to see, a team that gets to that point where I do think we proved that we're up there with the bigger programs. Like we're not a small school when it comes to softball. I think we are one of the best teams in the NCAA, and we proved it this year. And I am wearing a Weber State hockey jersey. They are $50 at the hockey games, and you should go support club sports because these things are awesome. And I wear it all the time, and I probably would have paid I don't know. I wear this thing all the time. I love it. It's like one of my favorite shirts ever.
It's true. This is not the first time that Simon has worn that hockey jersey on this show. Yeah.
I've worn it to plenty of things. I love this thing.
Yeah. I agree. I think that those jerseys look awesome, and the hockey team especially. They've been posting their recruits on social media. If you're not following them, please do. They've got a good operation over there, but they've been getting a lot of guys that I think that they're gonna have a pretty talented squad next season. But support club sports. But yeah, so that's the end of the NCAA tournament for the Wildcats. We put a close on the season. The Wildcats still remain conference champions, and yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this season now, man. Like let's go down memory lane a little bit here, and let's talk about some of our favorite moments from this season because it was a historic one and there were a lot. And so I've kind of cooked up a few here to give us a sense of, maybe this was our favorite moment about this. And so first one that I wrote down, man, was favorite home run this season. Simon, what do you got for your favorite home run?
My favorite home run, I brought it up on the last show, was like my favorite play of the conference game, as far as the conference tournament goes, was Arissa Henderson's grand slam against Idaho State. I was sitting on with press. They put him on top of the the box for the announcer. So they'll put me like up on this balcony, and you can kind of see everything going on. You feel like a ball is going to hit you. It's awesome, but kind of and what happened was she got up there on the first inning and hits this ball to the warning track. And immediately you knew that she had kind of figured it out against him and that she was going to knock it over the park the next time. And then you see the batters, like the bases get loaded. Not only that, but Chloe Camarillo hit a home run right before she did, like right after she did that. But then goes up and does the grand slam in the second inning. And it was just so satisfying to watch that ball go over. It was awesome. So that was my favorite home run of the season.
Yeah, I mean that's a good one, man. Because like you said, when that ball went over the fence, I think that there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Weber State was going to beat the Bengals. Like they were going to cast out the demons of last season, losing as a host in the first round to Portland State. That wasn't happening today. The Wildcats were going to win. They were going to beat the Bengals, and they were going to advance to the next round. And
I had my text with Emily, and I was like, we're out of here in 5. And I posted that right before that. And I saw Richardson get up on there, and I'm like, Luca's up the bat. And then she's like, yep, you called it. And I'm like, yep.
Yeah, man, I think for me, couple of home runs come to mind. One is an Arissa Henderson one. The home run against Utah. Man, that was such a big, like it felt like that moment sort of gave the Wildcats the momentum they needed to beat Utah at Wildcat softball field and be like, yeah, we can play with you. We can do it.
Yep.
And they did, right? They ended up, when Arissa put the ball over the fence, that was a big one. But another one that came to mind that I really, really liked. Oh, man, there's so many good ones. I was going to say Faith Ho's first one off the scoreboard. That was a good one.
Yes, that was a good one.
But another one that I was going to bring up was, and this home run happened in a game that the Wildcats did end up losing. But the home run against Utah State by Mika Chong, I've been calling her Mika Bombs, because we know, having watched Mika this season, that she has that power, and it's going to be great to watch her play over the next few seasons. She was such a great hitter at the plate, was brought up in a lot of pinch hitting situations, and she delivered in a lot of those situations. But late in the game against Utah State, when she hit that home run, I think it was a go-ahead home run at the time to put the Wildcats up after, a massive Utah State rally, because the Wildcats were up big time. I mean, if you guys remember that game, they ended up I think both teams scored double-digit runs. It was just nutso. Unfortunately, the Wildcats lose. Utah State has the devil magic against the Wildcats, I guess. But that home run felt big, man. And especially for a freshman coming off the bench to deliver like that, Mika Bombs, that was great, man. And so I like that moment. But like I said, the Faith Ho home run off the scoreboard, that was a good one. The Arissa Henderson home run against Utah, the Arissa Henderson granny against Idaho State. Man, there were just so many good bombs this season that were just clutch and huge for the moment.
Yep. And that's one of the things too. I love that. I love that Mika Bombs one because one of the things is like she was defining herself, especially in that California series. I think it was against San Diego State that this hit might have been against, when she came in and kind of solidified the game for the Cats. But that is one of the things, like, she's a clutch player, and that's a home run that you remember for a while. You know what I mean? Because of it's that little start to who's going to be just this incredible player for Weber State that we don't forget. So,
yeah, man. Yep. So next on my list, I have favorite defensive play of the year. I mean, Wildcats had some good ones, so much so that they even ended up on ESPN.
Yep.
So, Simon, your favorite defensive play this year? What do you got?
I think you have that one on ESPN they got there with McHouston, and she that was a phenomenal one with her diving from, I believe it was around first base where she got there. And I talked to the photographer who actually caught that moment, and he was talking about how awesome it was. They had a double play against Northern Colorado where it was grounded up and just this like simple toss to second and then right to first on it. And it was just fast, and it was one of those ones that you kind of tell, like, we were at a little bit of a different level. And I think it had happened just right after that first lost the conference play,
Mm,
and there may have been in that. I'm trying to remember because I think it was after that one, and it was just like one of those things where we
they
saw him
just turned
coming
it on.
down. Yep, they turned it on. So I loved that play. It got on Instagram on the Wildcats page. It was just so clean, and it was the definition of this defense that basically has like a 95% fielding percentage, and like I don't. How many airs did they get this season? I don't even think it's double digits on how many airs they got this season. Like it was low, and so I loved I loved that play. I think it just defines Wildcat softball.
Yeah. For me, I think probably my favorite defensive play this year. I did enjoy, anytime that Lauren Hull was going to gun someone down. I love those. I mean, and I think there was one. I think it was in the Lehigh game in the tournament. She gunned down somebody trying to run on her, and
Yeah,
I always loved that. There was another play where Mia Rushton in center field. She's running. She's sort of coming toward the ball, but the ball she catches the ball over the shoulder to save the runs, and I think it ended up ending the inning as well. It was just a huge play, and it was just like, man, that's great stuff. And so, like you said, defensively, the Wildcats they were just so good. There were so many good defensive plays this year that kept runs off the board and kept them in games. And so credit to the coaching staff, man. It's well coached team. Just did an absolutely incredible job coaching them up and doing the best of what they with the team that they had. And I think that they made a big impact on this squad.
exactly. Yep.
So now, man, I want to ask you a lot of dubs, 38 of them this season, tied the conference or tied the program record. What's your favorite dub this season? The biggest dub that you
Utah game. Yep.
Utah game in Ogden,
Yep.
second game of that set. Wildcats walk away winners.
Exactly. I think that that's one of those things. We had done so much in the preseason and everything, playing against major schools and just destroying the entire state of Nevada, which was awesome. We were
Yeah.
beating, right? Like we were
Make
beating San
TikTok
Diego
about that.
State. Yeah. We got like Texas A&M, everything like that. Like we were just killing them. But like it's those in-state games that I think mean the most to fans and to people spectating, and I think even to players. Like, you can't tell me that Arissa Henderson wasn't a little bit happy seeing the Utes go down. Like there's still some of that BYU blood in there. Like she had to love it. And I think that's one of those things. Like it just means so much beating a team that really dominates in state and kind of saying, "Hey, we're in town now." So yeah,
Yeah. Now that Utah win was big, especially after the non-conference schedule and being like, "Oh, we haven't beat this team since 2019." It's been a few years. Like they just got our number. To get that game, I think, was just really big for this team, and especially for the squad to kind of be like, "Yeah, we can play," because
yeah,
Utah consistently had an RPI just ahead of the Wildcats, and so for them to kind of have that opportunity was like, "Yeah, man, we can play."
yep.
For
I also
me, there were there were a lot of really good dubs this season,
there
right?
is.
You mentioned the Texas A&M game. I think the San Diego State win is a little underrated on our
It is.
schedule, to be honest. Like that was a big win. That was a huge win. And
Yep.
at the time, it was just like, yeah, we knew that was big. We wanted to win two against San Diego State because then we could say, oh, we swept the Mountain West had the Wildcats not lost to Utah State. I think, going into that game, we had anticipated winning that because the kind of squad that we had was much better than the squad that they had. Just had a weird, weird day up in Logan. But
Exactly.
for me, I think that my favorite dub this season, oh man, the comeback win against UVU is big.
Yeah, that one is good.
Sweeping UNLV was big.
That was big. Yep.
But probably the Texas A&M game. I feel like in terms of like when like, we really started to believe that this team was different. I think that was it. One hitting Texas A&M, who was a tournament team, coached by Mary Kay Amagone's good good friend and former teammate Joe Davis, who I think ended up getting her what was the milestone? She got like 3,000th win
Yeah.
uh, in the tournament this year. It was just absolute. That was a huge win. And so if I were to pick, that's probably the biggest win. But my favorite win, probably the Mariah Ramirez 16K game against SUU, because not only is it against the Birds and it's
Well,
in
is
Ogden, but Mo Ramirez out there absolutely just dealing, man, and getting 16 Ks, ending the game on a strikeout to tie the record. Just, man,
Yep.
etching her way into, the Big Sky record books. That was probably my favorite dub of the season. It was just like, man, that's great.
I've quoted this one a lot, but one of my favorites will always be the Idaho State game at the end of that series, the 17-11
Oh
against
yeah.
Haley Rainey. You can't hate that game. I think that is a barn burner if I've ever seen one, and I love seeing that.
Yeah.
That was a fun game.
Yeah, man, that was a when they shelled her in that game, like all fear of you Idaho State went away, because it was like,
Yep,
we just shelled your ace.
we
I
just
don't
shelled
care.
them.
I don't care who you are. Wildcats could beat anybody. I don't care. Anybody in the
Yep,
conference, like, the next time I see you, I'm not afraid. And that was kind of the vibe with Sac State, right? It was like, we shelled Marissa Bertuccio every single time we faced her. So much so that they didn't even play her in the championship game because they knew the Wildcats were going to shell her, right? Like, it was going to happen. Like, she cannot pitch against this team. And
nope,
she's the conference pitcher of the year. And we talked all about that, last episode. But yeah, that game, like you said, that third game where it was like, oh, okay, the Wildcats took two. It's good. Oh, maybe they're going to lose this one because they were down early. They
right.
came back and they
Came
freaking win and swept the Bengals. And it was like, dang.
Yep,
No quit cats, dude. The no quit cats.
exactly.
So, Simon, now we got to flip the script a little bit. Most painful L this season. Which one is it?
That was a little bit easier to target, kind of just because we don't have as many L's.
Only 10, what, 12? Ended up with 12
12.
L's for the season?
Yep, 12 in the entire thing. I mean, like if we're counting NCAA tournament, I think that Lehigh game was
Yeah.
that was brutal. That was hard to watch. Just because again we were the better team, and
We were.
I think we would have really turned some heads had we advanced after that game. That one's hard. I think there was one against I think it was the Cal State Fullerton one too. That was tough.
That was tough because they came back and they beat the Wildcats late. And
Yeah,
once again, Fullerton was a tournament team as well this year. Um,
absolutely.
that was a rough game.
That was rough because I'm like, we had that game, like we had it right there, and then just in those last couple innings, it was like, nope.
Yeah,
So,
Fullerton comes back and wins it. I think for me, the most painful L is the Utah State game that we talked about earlier.
yeah,
At that point, the Wildcats had lost just one game to the Mountain West Conference. It was a split with San Diego State, which is a big deal because we talked about how talented of a team they were. They were a tournament team this year. They were no joke, and to split with San Diego State in San Diego was a big deal, right? And so I think that everybody assumed that the Wildcats would then, that final Mountain West Conference game was going to be against Utah State, who was not having a good year. They weren't great. And the Wildcats were, taking the trip up to Logan to play them in their Mickey Mouse Park. And they ended up going back and forth. They let the Aggies rally. And the Aggies ended up coming away with the dub. And I think that was just such a painful loss because it's just like, this was a dub, man. Like,
it was.
this team should not lose to that Utah State team. Like,
Yep,
they stink. They're terrible. And they ended up losing. And so it's just, I would say, like, like you said earlier, the in-state games mean a little bit more,
they
even
do.
though Utah State was not a good team. They were nowhere near being close to an NCAA tournament berth in the Mountain West Conference. Man, losing that game hurt because it was just like, ugh, are you kidding me? Them? Why do they
Yeah,
have the devil magic? I hate
yeah.
it.
I'm okay with Utah. I'm okay with BYU if they beat us a game. That's fine. They're tough, but Utah State, I'm like, no, we had them. We had them. And yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'd like to see a game against BYU. They were the only in-state team that we did not play. You can say, well, what about Salt Lake Community College? Like, okay, sure, we didn't play Salt Lake Community College. That's fair. We're not going to play a team like Snow. It's just
No,
not. It's not going to happen. And so you basically played everybody. You played everybody who's on your level for the most part, except for Brigham Young.
except for
And
BYU.
I would have liked to see it. I would have liked, have an opportunity against that team because they were good too. They didn't end up making the tournament in the West Coast Conference, but they were close
Yeah.
in
Yep.
RPI to the Wildcats.
Yep. No, I think that one's a game that I would like to see, but we obviously talk about Portland State and everything like that. That was
What might have been.
what might have been, and I would have loved to see it. Like I said, I'll repeat what I said on the last show when I say that us not facing Portland State, like we had nothing to prove. Like we obviously were the best team in the conference. There's no doubt about it. Like what we just did in that conference tournament, there's no doubt we were the best team. But I still would have loved to see it. You know what I mean? Like it would have been, having them travel to Portland State, having every game get canceled. Like that was the series, like that pinnacle ending of the regular season that we all wanted to see. And fortunately, I didn't get to see it. So yeah.
Yeah, and especially for the record, right? The
Yeah.
Wildcats tied the program record for wins at 38. That's why winning against Lehigh or beating Portland State in one of those games would have made the difference, right? Because if they were going to be conference champions, they would have had to get to 38.
Yep.
One more dub would have broken the record and would have make this the high water mark for this program, and they just didn't get there because of the rain in Portland. So whatever.
Exactly.
Simon, really quickly wrapping up the segment. Do you feel that Weber State is a preseason number one favorite? I mean, I look at this roster and they didn't lose too much. Of course, losing the services of Arissa Henderson, which is a big deal, losing Chloe Camarero and her bat, and then also losing Brooke Moiai and Abby Sagert, that senior leadership, that group leaving the program, but the core of the team remains intact. And so I got to look at that and say, yeah, I think that they're probably the favorite, right? Like, who's better?
Right. Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, like you put up a season that's that good. You know what I mean? Like, and we talked about it before at the beginning of the season. The Wildcats don't rebuild; they restock. Like that. That's what Coach Amico does. The thing with it is that I think too that's going to add to that is you can look at the transfer portal because I think that's going to be one thing that we have to look at this season is who doesn't want to play for Weber State right now. Like it is a good like we've defined ourselves as one of the top softball programs in the NCAA right now, and I think we have. I think we're going to get prospects that are going to be something that a lot of other schools in the Big Sky don't have the opportunity to get some of the prospects that we're going to get solely because of what we've been doing lately. Because I really do think we're a team that people want to play for. So.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the prospects that are coming in from Riverton High School, who are nationally ranked right now in softball. Got a couple of really good prospects coming from a nationally ranked team locally. They're choosing Weber State. Yep. And so I think that's a credit to Coach Amico and her recruiting, her staff, and their recruiting ability, but also to where this program is at. You know that if you come to Weber State, you will get an opportunity to play. You will play a tough out-of-conference schedule. Coach Amico makes no bones about that. That's how she likes to do it. She wants to try and put her team up against the best, usually in the West, that she can. And so you're going to get games against UCLA. You're going to get games against Cal State Fullerton. You're going to see San Diego State. You're going to see Grand Canyon, who was also a tournament team this year. They were the WAC champion. You're going to get UNLV, right? You're going to get to play those programs if you come to Weber State. So you're going to get a chance to play some of the best softball in the West. And then you're also going to get a chance to make it through the Big Sky Conference and play in the NCAA Tournament.
Exactly.
That's the thing that happens in Ogden. And you're going to get to, if your family, if you're like, these local recruits coming from Riverton High School, you're probably going to get an opportunity to host the conference tournament in Ogden, because that's what happens. The Wildcats win the regular season title. This is the 6th time in a row or something like that, 6 or 7, I can't remember. And so that's what happens. The conference tournament gets played in Ogden. And so if you're local, like these local recruits are, your family can just take a short drive up to Ogden and they get to watch you play in the conference tournament, because there is no doubt in my mind the Wildcats, they're going to get to play. And now with, SUU dropping out of the conference, going to the WAC, all of the 6 remaining teams in the conference will play in the conference tournament going forward. So preseason number 1 favorite, I got to think it's the truth. I got to think that's it. Who's better?
Exactly. That's the only thing. Like, I think the only other team that, might be doing something interesting in the offseason or might be having a little bit of a development in Idaho State. Like, I think they're going to get better than they were last season. But I don't think they have the power to match a team like the Wildcats and really come in and put a threat to, being regular season or Big Sky champs like we do. So,
yeah. So, folks, that's our season review in sum. Now we're going to go on to a quick game. I'm going to try and keep this short to kind of wrap up the show. I'm calling this game the cream of the Wildcat crop. And so now everything's in the books. Everyone's played this year. All the teams have played, all of the NCAA sanctioned sports. And so, Simon, I wanted to ask you, of all of these teams, who do you think, like, give me your list. Who do you think had the best season, starting from the top, going all the way down? Let's include golf in this, because, the men's and women's golf programs had some good play this year, with the men, of course, winning the conference championship in the tournament. Tennis programs had good showings. The women's program winning the regular season championship and then also playing in the conference championship against NAU and losing in a heartbreaker there. Of course, softball winning the conference championship, and the run that they had. Men losing a heartbreaker in the conference tournament to a good Montana State team. I mean, we all agreed that was probably the real conference championship, because when Montana State ended up going on to face Northern Colorado, it wasn't a contest, right? It wasn't the same as when the Wildcats and the Bobcats had played the night before.
Exactly.
So, give me your list, man. What do you who do you give me from 1 to 10 who you think you had the best season on down?
1 to 10. Okay. Softball is 1.
Softball at 1.
Yep. That is as the historic season of Weber State right there. I can't, I think I've talked about it on the show for a while that this softball team is different, and I have no doubt about it. Yeah. Yep. I honestly think as far as terms of success and everything like that, men's golf is a good number 2.
They won the conference championship, right?
Yep. And we got Reese Fisher, who I think is a phenomenal golfer. I think he's one of those guys that, he puts Weber State on the map even more. You know what I mean? And when people see Reese Fisher went there, it starts to attract attention. Number 3.
3 is where it gets tough for me too. I think I've got my choice though.
I think for me, it's between volleyball and women's tennis for me, kind of at the number 3 spot. And that's what's hard about it. Because I think women's tennis was phenomenal. Saved that last game, which was heartbreaking. If we're going to talk about heartbreaking games, that was a tough one.
And I thought it was going to be closer because when those two teams had played, they had played. I don't think they played in Flagstaff, but like when they had played last,
right,
it was closer.
Yep. But I think NAU had three conference player of the weeks coming into it. They were a tough team.
It was their 4th straight championship game too, I think, something like that. They were on quite a run.
Yep. And then volleyball, obviously, I think I would have loved to see them in the D1 national tournament and everything like that. Obviously, didn't get to see that happen this year.
But the NIVC run was something.
It was something, yes. And I think, especially their game against Portland State, where they really kind of had that revenge game against them.
Yes, they absolutely did, right?
It definitely that revenge. That's probably what actually pushes volleyball up to number 3 for me, and women's tennis to 4. I think I don't blame anybody for switching those two up. I think that's two phenomenal programs this year, and obviously both have merits. But that's for me. I think seeing that Portland State revenge game right there was just awesome. Number 5, men's. Do I do men's hoops at number 5? That's
I don't
true.
put them there.
I don't put them there. Like that's the hard. Like had they finished at the number 1 seed, I probably would have put them there. Like that. I think that's fair.
Yep.
Um, are you putting women's soccer at 5? That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Putting soccer at 5 because they played in the conference championship against Montana.
Right.
They ended up losing to the Grizz, which is a heartbreaker, of course. It sucks. Yep. But I'm impressed because I don't think anybody had conference championship expectations of the women's soccer team going into this season. Next season we'll do our best to do a women's soccer dedicated show, so we'll get coverage on them. But I think going in with a new head coach, I don't think people really knew what to expect, especially since the last couple of seasons had been just sort of meh. It hasn't been great since the Wildcats had won the conference championship a few years ago. And then to come in and have the run that they did in the regular season, to go out to, I think the conference tournament was in Greeley. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't Greeley because they were there at the same time that the women's the volleyball team was out there playing Northern Colorado. And so, it was like, I would put them at number 5 because they go in, they play in the conference championship. They don't win, which is a bummer, but they were there.
Yep,
and no one expected that from them. So good for them.
Yep, exactly. And I think, it kind of matches up to where, like, I think they're a good number 5 under that women's tennis team at number 4. Number 6 is tough because I don't know if I can put men's hoops at number 6 yet either. Like they felt more
That's
like
where I've got them. I've got them at 6.
You got them at 6. Yeah. Why wouldn't they be at number 6? I had them like maybe as a thing for number 5. No, they're number 6. Yeah. I think that's one thing. Had they finished at the number 1 seed, like I'm not even talking about winning the championship. Like I'm talking about just finishing at the number 1 seed. I think I probably would have ranked them just a little bit higher.
Sure.
And it was
season title, fine.
Yep, exactly. And I think the hard thing about the Wildcats men's team is that I really do think that the 2 best teams in the conference were Montana State and Weber State. Like I have no doubt about it.
100% agree with you.
Exactly. Like I think they were. I think they I think it's fair to say that Weber State had the best basketball team in the conference this year.
Now, they had the most talented team
in the conference. Talented team. That's the kicker right there. Because I think you had that senior leadership and everything like that. You had Hewen, Dylan Jones, JJ Overton,
Dante Bassett, Michael Kozak in his long time at Weber State. I mean, there was plenty to like about this squad.
Yep, and I would have loved to see Dante Bassett play more. Again, I think that kind of pushes them up a little bit more. But unfortunately, had that injury. Always hard with that. But yeah, yep. I love that Wildcat hoops team. But it is one of those things where they're definitely that 6 seed for me. Yeah. Are we doing like club sports like men's soccer and hockey or no?
I didn't include them. I just included NCAA sanctioned sports here.
Gotcha. So we still have men's soccer in there. No, men's soccer, no, men's tennis. So we got men's tennis, and then we got women's basketball, we got football, and then we got
women's golf.
Women's golf, yes, yeah. I'm probably going to do women's golf around 7. That's kind of what I'm feeling on that one.
Yep.
And then I think I'm probably going to do. It's tough. I'm debating between whether I put women's basketball and men's tennis at that 8 spot. That is tricky for me.
Yeah, so for me, I got women's golf at 7, men's tennis at 8.
Men's tennis at 8.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. Like I think men's tennis, we had Sebastian Buxman who was on fire this year, and I think he's one of those guys that's proving that he's going to be the future of this program. I think he's a phenomenal player. So I think that's a good number 8. As for number 9 for women's basketball, um, I love seeing them this year. And one of my favorite moments that I had was when I was in Idaho and we were doing the press conference after they had beat Sacramento State, and this reporter asked Coach V just what it would like, just what happened to kind of turn around this team that hadn't had a ton of wins. This
Haven't
team
won a
with
tournament game since 2017.
right, and she's like, well, and he was kind of just talking about the season. Like, he's like, you guys were below 500, all the stuff. You came in as the second lowest seed, everything like that. And she's like, well, the thing is, we were losing all these games by like 4 points. And she was absolutely right.
There were a lot of close losses. Yeah.
Right. A lot of close losses. I think one thing, the reason that I would put women's basketball over football is because they first off won a tournament game, which is always, big marker right there. And then number 2, I think they have a very established core 3 along with the coach that I think propels them into next season. That was one of the things is I think, we have to take into and consider potential of these programs. And I think women's basketball clearly defined that potential just with, having that big 3 right there. That's a huge mile marker. Football comes in last. I think that
last, which I think is surprising, but looking at the way that the schedule had it out, I mean, it was a rough fall, man. It was rough fall. One quality win on the season against Eastern Washington up in Cheney, which was big, really big win. But Chris Jackson had himself a game, but it was rough. Every other big game that the Wildcats ended up playing, they lost. Many of those games were at home. Lost to James Madison, lost to Davis at home, lost to Montana State at home. Ended up losing to Portland State at home. And I think that win right there is kind of why I've got them down so far. Is that like, okay, you lost to a good James Madison team who played in the semifinal. You lost to a good Montana State team who played in the national championship. You lost to a good Davis team at the last second when you probably shouldn't have, but it is what it is. Okay, they got one on you. Okay. But then you lose to Portland State. That hurts. I can't remember the quarterback's name, but you let him go off on you. Just didn't have an answer for him. It was tough. And so that one right there kind of put the nail in the coffin. And I think probably that loss right there is the reason the Wildcats don't make the playoffs. And so miss the playoffs, not even in the hunt for a conference championship this year. It was just a really down year. And I think a difficult season considering how much senior leadership there was on the team. And now, looking forward at, there are some skill positions that there are some question marks going into next season. A lot of young guys are going to have to step up. Looking at the roster right now, it's like we're going to need to see some guys really, start to perform. There's not an obvious next man up in some of these positions, right?
Right.
And so I think that's why maybe they've had the roughest year of all.
Yep. And I think that's one thing too. Like if we're going to look at potential and everything like that, like we had with women's basketball and everything, it is hard with them because they were a senior-led team, and now you're not having Shees come back next season, and you're not having Sheed and anything like that.
Rashid Shaheed, no Sherwin Lavaca, no Connor Mortensen. George Tarlis has transferred out. You lose Ben Bowes. You lose who else on the offensive line? You're losing a lot of guys, man.
Right.
A lot of guys.
Have
no
NFL
David Ames.
You know what I mean?
No Randall Grimes. No, and so I look around and I go, gosh, man, like what's going to happen here? Because we've lost a ton of guys.
Yep.
And it hurts. It's tough.
Yep. And I think we'll see Coach Mental come in, and I love seeing this Coach Mental move. I talked to him, and he is awesome. I think he's one of those guys where we'll see a little bit of a different style in the offense that suits our players' skills a little bit better. And I'm hoping that that's one thing that we see this season, especially is just Coach Mental coming in and really taking advantage of some of the skills that we have on our offense a little bit better and getting us back to where Weber State football belongs.
Yeah. So that's it. That's cream. Oh, the Wildcat crop, according to Simon and Colby.
That's
Simon,
right.
man, that's all we got, man. This show ran a little bit long, but it's the last one of the season, so I just wanted to, take a second to thank you, dude, for sticking with us. You were on a ton of shows this season, especially beyond just men's hoops and football. When a lot of our panelists, those are kind of their areas of expertise. You were willing to kind of dive in to some of these other ones like women's hoops with us and softball and volleyball, right? Like all these other shows that we ended up doing this year, talking more about those teams and giving them the coverage that they deserve. You were right there with us, man. So want to thank you and thank all of our other panelists, Jessica Euler, Dan Hubler. Want to thank you, your colleague Emily Miller, also from the Signpost, for her appearances. Also want to, thank our other guys, Sean Lewis, Dustin Chapman, Chappie. Who else who else are we regularly having on the show, guys? Like
Did we have
it's
John King on? We had John
yeah.
King on a
Haven't
few
had
minutes.
John King on in a while. He's doing all right though. I sent him a text the other day. Say, how you doing, man? He's like, oh, it's busy. So he's been busy at work doing the stuff. But want to thank him too and everybody who was a panelist this year and this season, man. We really enjoyed having everybody on, talking some Wildcat sports. And so we'll be going into, like I said at the top of the show, off-season mode for a little while. I'll be trying to produce a alumni interview for you folks every, a couple of weeks or so, just so that we can keep the content flowing, but then also get ourselves prepared for season 3 of Weber State Weekly, which will begin sometime around August later this year. But Simon, thank you to you, man. Like I said, for sticking with us and being such a key part of this. Really appreciate you, man.
I
Um,
appreciate it, man. This is one of my favorite times of the week. I love doing this.
yeah, man, we'll wrap up the show like we usually do with the usual stuff. WeberStateWeekly@gmail.com. We'll be sending out some info to everybody to kind of get some feedback. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have the Patreon. Once again, want to thank our patrons. Really appreciate all of you all for supporting Weber State Weekly and having such an impact here. And then the blog, WeberStateWeekly.com. Probably doing a little bit more work over there as we move into off season now, as I have time to think about writing some things and cooking some stuff up. I've been thinking about maybe doing. We did an all-decade team for the football team. We did not do that for basketball, so maybe do a men's hoops all-decade team. That could be a lot of fun. So maybe think about that. Might be something coming up on the blog soon, but we'll see. But Simon Morrison, thanks again, man, for taking some time to chat with Weber State Weekly. We'll wrap it up like we usually do. Weber State, Weber State.
Great.
Great, great. Go